All right, joining us now in Richmond, this is going to be fun, is our new Democratic delegate from the 72nd District in Virginia, which is the Henrico area, Schuyler VanValkenburg. Schuyler, welcome. Great to have you.
Hi, John.
So I want to get to your bills and your topics in a minute, but yesterday out of the state Senate, I know it's the other side of the aisle, but
Right.
Coming out of the state Senate, ERA passes, 8-6, comes out of Jill Vogel's committee. Vogel votes for it. Yay,
Right.
Jill, as along with conservative Senator Bill DeSteff. Now, here's the deal with Vogel, okay? She's a lawyer, right? She's probably one of the most astute politicos left on the Republican side in Virginia, and she votes for it because she sees the handwriting on the wall. We had Eileen Fillercorn was on my radio station on the Susan Platt show last Saturday, and she said if the ERA vote comes to the floor, it's going to pass easily in the House. True or false?
True, for sure.
Why?
If we can get it to the floor, it'll pass, and Virginia will be the 38th state and the last state necessary to get this thing through.
Now, some of us, like me, are saying it's kind of a lot of jumping up and down. That's why I'm in favor of it, because who cares? You know, I could care less. Basically, I've got other issues like, walls and immigrants in the economy on my mind. But a lot of people are saying it doesn't matter if it passes because all the other states would have to go back and repass it because the time limit is up, right? Because I remember this battle going on in the 70s.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question is, right, is the time limit up? And I think the argument that it's not up is more correct than the argument that it is. I mean, look, if you look at the Fifth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment doesn't mention anything about a timeline, right? It says 2/3, it says 3/4. If you look at the last amendment that got through, what people like to call Mr. Madison's amendment because it was in his original set of asks for the Bill of Rights, but before it got chopped down to the 10 that we know it as, that amendment eventually got through. And so I think the argument that all these other states would have to go back to the time is up is wrong. And I think that, if Virginia was able, and hopefully we are, to be the 38th state, it would probably go to courts. We'd have to go through a procedure. But I think at the end of the day, the ERA would go through. And I think it's something incredibly important to have in our Constitution. The Constitution it's our values, it's our set of guidance, it's what we look to govern, and I think it's incredibly important to have that amendment in there so that women do have equality, and it's written into the Constitution.
So here's a text I got from Pam in Norfolk, who says she's a Republican, by the way. She says, I'm a Republican. We need to support ERA. Democrats will turn it into a Republican war on women. If we don't, there's nothing wrong with it, and it breaks no Republican principles. That's from Pam in Norfolk. I'm of the opinion that if Jill Vogel is for it, I'm for it. I'm good to go, right? So
yeah.
We're good. Let's see how it plays out. I'm a big fan of Jill Vogel. Schuyler, you've got a bill in that I find very intriguing, which has to do with non-competes for lower-level employees. By the way, we're with Schuyler VanValkenburg. He's a House of Delegates member, Democrat from Henrico, part of the Blue Wave in 2017. Schuyler, I'm intrigued by this bill because a lot of these non-competes are written by lawyers, and they screw lower-level workers out of getting an opportunity to get another job after something happens to the employment they have. Can you quickly outline your bill, what your vision is, and what you're trying to attain?
Yeah, so this bill is a bill that would ban non-compete clauses for people who make below the median wage. When we think about non-compete clauses, people traditionally think of things like trade secrets or people who are higher up the corporate ladder. But what's really been happening over the last decade is that non-competes have been filtering down to these low-wage workers. I'm talking gym trainers, fast food workers, nail salons, hairstylists, summer camp workers, arborists. And so what we've seen in some states is we've seen some states, blue states and red states, ban non-competes altogether, California, North Dakota, Oklahoma. Mine does not go that route. Mine goes the route that we've seen in some other states, which is limiting them for low-wage workers, Hawaii, Utah, New Mexico, Oregon, Illinois, because right now 18% of low-wage workers have a non-compete clause, 18%. And what that does is it does two things. First is it hurts the worker. We see wage stagnation. Wages in states that enforce non-competes have 10% lower wages than in states that restrict them. But it also hurts the market. It hurts innovation. It hurts entrepreneurship. And I like to give kind of two examples of where I come at from this. One example is, imagine you're a college kid, and you're working on the side, and you're working as a barista in a coffee shop, and you think, you know what, I really like doing this job. I'd love to go into business on this, and hey, my neighborhood, Lakeside and Henrico, we need a coffee shop. I want to start a coffee shop in Lakeside so the neighborhood has one. But you can't, because your non-compete lasts 3 years, and so your coffee shop can stop you from innovating and starting a small business. The second example I like to give is, and this was in a New York Times article a couple of years ago, as an arborist who had a non-compete. He had a family. He was living in I think somewhere in Texas, and he's an arborist. That's what he loved to do. It was his passion. He's non-competed out. He couldn't work as an arborist for 3 years. And last year I had a bill that, Virginia was one of 20 states where you could revoke a professional license for defaulting on your student loan. And this came out of the early 90s when student loan defaults were starting to rise. And, that struck me as backwards, just as these kind of do. We want people to work. We want people to work where they're passionate, the dignity of work. We want people to work where they're skilled. And this arborist could no longer be an arborist because of this non-compete clause. And, what you end up doing is if people can't work, they're going to work in jobs below their talent level. They're going to have to go on unemployment. They're going to have to use government programs. And so we should want people to do the work they want to do. We should want to help markets. We should want to help entrepreneurs. And I'll finish with this. In Utah, this was sponsored by, it's not an exact copy of the Utah bill, but it's similar in spirit. The GOP sponsor, Mike Schultz, said, if an employer can fire anybody for any reason, employees also need to have the right to walk.
Look, I am so in favor of this bill. I'm sure there'll be some sort of like a wage level. But like you said, if you're making $30,000, you have to sign a non-compete. It's kind of ridiculous. You ought to be able to go in and work and do what you want. We're with Schuyler VanValkenburg. He's a Democratic House of Delegates member. He came in the 2017 Blue Wave, and that's the Henrico area. Got a couple other questions on a couple other topics. Schuyler, we got a couple more minutes.
Sure.
First of all, there's a rumor going around that the Democrats are going to collaborate with a handful of Republicans and get sweeping gun legislation that is going to ban assault weapons and certain magazines in Virginia. True or false?
I doubt that that's true. I would think that's false. I think there's a lot of things we can do in Virginia to promote safety and the Second Amendment. We've got, I was on the school safety committee that was meeting that Speaker Cox created through the fall and summer. And one of the things that myself, Jeff Bourne, and Mike Mullen proposed were a couple of, I think, pretty commonsensical things, such as mandatory reporting of lost and stolen weapons. We know that in particular with school shootings, that a large majority of them, the people who got the guns that went into schools, got them from their family's house or their friend's house. So we proposed that. We proposed slightly tightening laws for improper storage of guns. We have weaker laws in Texas, and those didn't go very far in the select committee at all. And so I would be really surprised if we got any gun legislation through the General Assembly. I think maybe the one piece that has a chance are the at-risk warrants, which we've seen pass in conservative states and in states with conservative governors, where if you are thought to be of harm to yourself or your family, a gun can temporarily be removed from your home. But I would think if anything got through, it would be that, and I doubt that would get through.
So, Scott, I got two questions, if I may. Now, you're a school teacher, kind of like Kirk Cox was, all right? So you're a school teacher, Schuyler. So what I want to ask you is there's this program I'm trying to learn about, and it's called We the People, and it's a high school competition. What is this about?
Yeah, so this is it's a nationwide program. I'm glad you asked. It's a nationwide program that I teach and coach at my high school. It's done by the Center for Civic Education, which is kind of does a bunch of different civic education nationally, and We the People is one of their things. And it's a competition that happens in all 50 states, and it's a constitutional competition. So it focuses on teaching government through a constitutional lens, and so kids spend months preparing questions like in a Senate hearing format where they address what they believe is constitutional or not about, say, the Fourth Amendment and metadata, or about executive power, or about, Federalists versus anti-Federalists. And then they're expected, once they've presented their opinions, they're expected to be able to take questions from a panel of judges. It could be you, it could be a lawyer, it could be a politician, and defend themselves. And it is the number one way to kind of teach our set of values, our constitutional norms, to get people, participating in government. They did a study a couple years ago that showed that We the People alumni vote at something like an 88% clip. I actually have a budget amendment in for civic education. I think we do a very poor job of teaching civic education, not just in Virginia, but across the country. And we have a lot of groups like the Center for Civic Education who do a really good job at bringing innovative ways to get people involved and to get people to understand the issues. And I think in Virginia we could be doing a better job of fostering a connection between schools, communities, and these organizations, because we should want civic literacy to be up, whether you're left, right, or center.
Look, I love this program. I love you're involved in it. Thanks for sharing that with us. I got to get to Victoria Cobb, but final question. Sunday, NFL playoffs, right? So I want to go to Richmond instead of having to drive to Dover Downs or Charlestown or West Virginia or MGM. I want to go to Richmond, or I want to go to Norfolk, and I want to bet the NFL like everybody else does around there. Right. When are we going to get gambling here, and when are we going to take our heads out of the sand? Because if you go to a casino, and I've been saying this for years, in MGM in Maryland, or you go to Dover Downs in Delaware, or you go to Charlestown just 30 miles from Leesburg, 60 to 70% of the cars have Virginia plates. When are you guys going to get your head out of the sand and get us gambling and get revenue coming in instead of going to the other states?
But I don't know if we're going to have long enough time to unpack my answer on this one, John. I feel very conflicted about this. The one response the one thing I don't like about this is where people say, well, we can tax it. We can tax a lot of things, but we don't, and for good reason. For me, the devil's in the details, because I do think it's important that we think about how gambling affects families, how it affects people who get addicted to gambling, and what it would mean for localities, and how much of a choice would they have.
Oh, Schuyler!
I grew up in upstate New York. We had OTBs all over the place.
Go to your local 7-Eleven.
I'm not sure I want an OTB. I want 5 OTBs in my neighborhood. So for me, the devil's in the details. When I see I want to see how people are thinking through this issue. But having said that, there's a lot of momentum on this issue. We've seen 3 or 4 bills put in, and so right now, I think I agree with the governor. Let's look at what the options are. Let's look at how we're talking about this. There's no reason to be fast and be first. Let's do it in a way that benefits, Virginians, and make sure that we're not making the mistakes that states that get in early are.
You're not fast and first. You're slow and last. Okay, and so it's like that's a ridiculous argument. I want you on your way into the General Assembly today to stop in any 7-Eleven and look at the people there buying lottery tickets and numbers and tell me there's no gambling in Virginia, and then just come to D.C. and drive to MGM Grand and walk through the parking lot, and 75% of the cars got Virginia plates. I mean, you're not going to legislate this out because you don't have it. You might as well allow it done, but I see where you're coming from. By the way, I'm against legalizing marijuana for one reason, and that's because Chap Peterson talked me out of it. Thanks for being with us, Schuyler. Schuyler, people want to get more information. Where do they go?
For this bill, you can contact our office. We've gotten a little bit of press on it in the daily press. You can go to my social media, VV for Delegate at Twitter, Schuyler VanValkenburg, that is SCHUYLER VanValkenburg.com, or my Facebook, which is also Schuyler VanValkenburg for Virginia, and we have information about all these things.